All right, so good evening, everyone. It's March 17th for our No More Relapse group. My name's Jill. I'm a grateful recovered alcoholic. And tonight we're going to do a deep dive into the phenomenon and the insanity of relapse. So we know that the big book says that we're being restored to sanity. And we know what happens when we pick up that first drink. So essentially what we do when we pick up that first drink is we go back to insanity. It's a choice. And I personally understood intellectually this program forward and backwards, yet I continuously relapsed. And for me, what I found in the end was that there was a big disconnect between understanding what alcoholism was, understanding the insanity of it in my head, and then actually believing it was happening to me. And then actually believing that I would die from this. It sort of felt like the bravado of when I was 16 and I first got my license, or I was driving well before I was 16, and the way I drove. I just had that feeling of invincibility, car crashes that happen to other people, but I'm not 16 years old. And yet I still do something that I know will kill me. As a mature adult, how on earth can we explain this? We know that first drink is going to take us back to the places we've been. We've been around this program long enough to know that the disease is progressive, yet we do it again and again and again. So what's missing? And what I came to understand was I never truly admitted I was powerless. I never truly accepted that this could kill me. Even though I had all the medical evidence in front of me, I still was playing this odd little game in my head that it was somehow I was disassociated that it was happening to me. So what I learned is that my relapses were almost programmed to happen, in that I stopped paying attention to what was going on in my head. And the best analogy I've had is I have an angel on one shoulder that is my program and is the way I want to live, the Jill 2.0 version I want to be, and the little devil on my other shoulder that when I'm close to relapse starts talking to me louder. And as much as I've been looking at this angel, this voice gets louder and louder. Now just nod if you've ever had the experience of an occasion coming up where you think, oh, I just might be able to drink and get away with it there. Or you have something burning in you and the idea starts at the back of your head. And it can be, at least for me, a good couple of weeks before the incident is going to happen. But the thought starts here. And then this little devil lots of nodding. Okay, so this little devil, the voice gets louder and louder until I'm almost in a trance, pre-programmed to act on it as soon as the situation presents itself. So this is a pre-programmed accident. And that's something that I had to realize was going to be with me the rest of my life. And I know a lot of people have this experience where they say, they never thought of alcohol again. I still do, except now it may be a fleeting thought. And very quickly, I know in my own head where it's going and where that, because I have practiced the steps in this program and done such hard work on these steps with a sponsor. so that I can recognize I can't trust my own brain. And that's really hard for an alcoholic. And when we were in the meeting last week, one of the things that we were talking about afterwards was this idea of giving up forever, of letting go completely. And that's where I found, as a stubborn alcoholic, whenever I would look at sobriety, I would be fighting the notion, because you can't tell me what to do. And I can't grasp living sober or carrying on the rest of my life without drugs and alcohol, because that's what most of my life has been. So in this early stages of recovery, I've got to keep it to the 24-hour period. And as soon as I let my mind go bigger than that, oh, what am I going to do next week? Or how am I going to handle this occasion that's coming up? And we know that there's been special occasions in here that have taken people out. So here's two things that will always take us down. And I'd write these down. First of all, relapse equals a return to insanity. And a return to drinking, when you know what we know, can't be explained any other way. We're not of our right minds when we do it. So why do we do it? Because it's our disease. We're not bad people. But where does it start? And there's two main things that take us down. The idea the little devil can be there all the time, but I'm very much more likely to turn and listen to that little devil when one of two things happens. I get a resentment and I don't address it, or I allow myself to go into self-pity. So let's just take a look at self-pity first. Pour me, pour me, pour me a drink. That's exactly where it goes. Every single human being has struggles. Yours might look a little bit different than mine. But one thing we know for certain going forward from this moment on is life is going to continue to happen to us because we're alive. That's the human condition, is coping with things that come along our way. And the second that I start to fall into a case of the poor me's, the next thing, if I start listening to my shortcut of I don't want to feel this, I don't want to deal with this, I pick up the drink. Resentments work much the same way. As soon as I start feeling anger at a situation, politics, I've had people go out on governments that have been elected. I've had people, I'm dealing with tariffs and things right now that could affect my business forevermore. It isn't affecting my sobriety because I don't resent the situation. It's politics. I disassociate with it. I cannot afford, no alcoholic can afford the luxury of a resentment. It says right in the big book, resentments take us down more than anything. And so does being irritable and discontent, which is the same thing as getting into a pity party. So we have to be hypersensitive to the things that are going to bring us down. And we discussed, if you listen to the recording of the very first session, which is only 5 or 6 meetings, 5 or 6 minutes, I went through the first things to be aware of: the HALT, hungry, angry, lonely, tired. HALT. They're warning signals. A lot of times when we feel like, oh, I just need a drink, or sometimes we just need to hydrate, with water. Or eat some food and get our blood sugar back up. The anger part of halt falls into the self-pity, angry at the government, angry at our brother, angry at our mother, angry at just life not treating us the way we think life should be treating us. And one of the big things that takes us down is loneliness. And so one of the things that I experienced this week in conversation was the importance of not just staying on Zoom, of going out into public meetings, and you may have to find a few, but the human connection of somebody being able to give you a hug, look you in the eye, and sit down with you and say, hey, do you want to go for coffee? Shall we discuss this? That's before Zoom, that's how normal friendships started. And that's how AA grew. But there's something very convenient about sitting behind a screen and being able to turn off the meeting or turn off our screen and walk away at our personal convenience. It also allows us to not pay attention as we would not do if we were in a public meeting, or just go off and do our laundry or whatever else we feel like doing. So interestingly enough, we've got a phenomenon today where sometimes people are going to 3 and 4 hours of meetings a day, or always have AA in the background, but they're not taking in anything. So if you're relapsing, let's just take a look at what your program involves. I find I need a physical home group. Now, it takes me an hour to drive there, but there's 2 reasons that I need a physical home group. One is I have to get out of my comfort zone, which is to isolate. And second of all, if life happens and I need human beings next to me, if all of my close relations and connections are with people on the other side of the country, if somebody dies or something happens, life happens, and I'm affected with one of the deepest human things that can happen, my Zoom friends can't necessarily be there for me in an hour. So think about that. Really think about your program and how you have it structured, because it's not about the quantity of AA that we do. Yes, we need in early sobriety that message coming in constantly to learn it and have it reinforced and to just not drink. But there comes a point where we have to look at our program and say, am I growing from this? Am I getting fed from this? Am I learning from this? It's not just about going to 4 meetings a day and not tuning into any of them, or being really attentive and mindful of what other people are saying in the rooms. It was also like that for me when I first started in the rooms. I was so busy thinking about what I was going to say that I didn't listen to what anyone else said. You know for yourself what your program is like. You know whether you pay attention in meetings. You know what you need to hear. And my question is, are you growing and from the program that you're doing? Don't be afraid to change your sponsor, change up your schedule and your meetings in order to get what you need to really do these steps. If you have a sponsor and they haven't gone through the steps with you through the big book, the way you need to be going through the big book, like this study group is not to replace you working one-on-one, unless I'm actually going through this work with you one-on-one, you working with your individual sponsor. But make sure you're actually working the program, because if you're not doing the steps, at least that's my experience, all I was doing was being an observer of AA and an intellectual student of the program, but I wasn't in the program. Does that make sense to everybody? Because FaceTime avails us nothing. Just sitting in a room and turning on a screen and watching your computer and doing other work or being on your phone is not attending an AA meeting. If you were in a live meeting and you were the speaker, you would be totally focused on everything else that's going on in that room. So if you're in it and it's just going in one ear and one out the other, that's okay if you're using it just as an hour to not drink. But what I'm talking about now is really moving on with your program and examining whether you still have this insanity or whether you've truly moved on from accepting powerlessness, complete and utter powerlessness over alcohol, and have actually made a list of all the unmanageabilities that are in your life today as a direct result of your powerlessness over alcohol. And that's a question that's really not an easy one to answer unless you stop and take a quiet time with yourself and say, okay, really, let's take a look at my program and where I'm going. Am I just treating this as a social club? Because a lot of people do. And there are a lot of AA groups that are made up of old timers that's how they started and that's how they've evolved. And they talk more about their medical procedures than they do about Alcoholics Anonymous. So what is relapse? Relapse is actually a medical term when the symptoms of a disease after a while reappear. And you can have a relapse with a flu. You can have a relapse with the disease of alcoholism and addiction. In neither case is the prognosis grave. It's likely you will recover from both. But while the flu will probably be self-limiting and go away on its own, you have to take positive steps to recover from relapse and alcoholism and addiction. It doesn't go away on its own. And in my experience, I had so many relapses that I had to put as much effort into my recovery as I did into my drinking. And that was not an easy thing for me to do. So my higher power floored me and gave me a series of operations that left me in bed for months where I could do nothing but study this stuff. And that was a blessed intervention. At the time, I didn't think so, but that's how I used my time. I read as many different things as I could about relapse. I went to as many different resources as I could. And some of the books were helpful, some of the audios were helpful, but none of it was helpful until I started to put my own name in the words. So first of all, I want you to recognize you have enough experience with relapse that you know when it's coming. Would everyone that has experienced a thought in their mind of alcohol looking like a good idea after a while, appearing in the brain, and you actually recognized it and did it anyway? That's the craziness. That's the insanity. We know we can't do this, but the thought starts, we start listening to the little devil. And the crazy thing is, I observe myself doing it. I feel like I'm hanging from the ceiling in the liquor store, seeing myself going and buying that bottle of wine where I know it's not an option for me, but I do it anyway. And the thought of going to do that occurred before I actually went into the liquor store, but I did nothing to intervene. And why is that? Because I'm an alcoholic. And that is never going to change for me. So what I've learned to do is become super sensitive to recognizing hungry, angry, lonely, tired, self-pity, resentments. We can't afford these things. So we have to become super tuned into ourselves. Pay attention to yourself. All of these other things, that stories that people tell, we relate to, but you know exactly what you've done. You know exactly what surrounded your last relapse. You can remember, if you've had more than one relapse, and everyone in here has, what preceded the insanity of taking that first drink. So what I'm suggesting to you is take some time and put that on paper. If you've relapsed more than once, what are the feelings or the circumstances that precede that first drink? How are we ever going to change our behavior if we're on autopilot and we're not actually cognizant of what is going on in our own thought process? All of these things were just words to me until I stuck stickies on my fridge and stuff. Halt, hungry, angry, lonely, tired. Until I wrapped numbers around my debit card to call, because all of a sudden going and using that card to buy a bottle of wine seemed like a good idea. What I'm suggesting is be sensitive to your thoughts. Be sensitive to your feelings. Become very tuned in to what precedes that last drink. And for those of you who have relapsed recently, or even if not recently, for Pete's sake, write this stuff down. Because one thing I have found is going back and rereading some of this stuff, it's as true for me today as 3 years ago when I first put it down. The frequency of it actually becomes wider between the episodes as time goes on. But after I've started that physical craving by picking up again, it takes, you guys have read the articles that presumably I've put in there about the toxin dumps and stuff on the website. It's a physical reality. After 30 days, and roughly every 30 days up to a year, your pancreas and your various organs are releasing the built up toxins that have accumulated from our years of drinking. And we can suddenly feel that alcohol is the only solution when we've been sober for a period of time. And so a lot of us will get to 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, or that infamous 1 year. And right around that period, I've known more people to relapse. And a lot of it is, again, this cleansing and this toxic and not being aware of the psychological factors too of things like anniversaries. So although many people recover from relapses once, twice, 6, 7 times, it isn't a basis for solid recovery. What I'm trying to get you to tune into is, why is this happening to me? And identify the sources. Identify what you are drinking at. Are you drinking at a person? Are you drinking at a feeling? Are you drinking at a situation? It's not, none of these things in and of themselves are making you drink. These are situations, life factors that you are drinking at. And if you work with a sponsor and go through the steps, step 4 is where we understand the underlying fear. The fear, for me, a big one, is not being good enough. My self-esteem, I overcompensate, overachieve, hide behind things because I never felt I was quite good enough. And then I'd almost accomplish something and I'd self-sabotage it, be it a relationship, be it a project, be it a life goal, because deep down, I didn't really think I deserved it. So it's not fatal if you relapse. One drink or one episode isn't necessarily the end of our program, but it isn't at all a learning experience unless we sit back and look at why did it happen? Not just, oh, I'm on day one again. That doesn't help us. We have to analyze how we got there. We have to be really mindful and tune in. What was going on in my brain, what was going on in your brain before it happened again? And write it down, because this will also be extremely useful in your 4-step work. But we need to pinpoint what is the cause of the relapse. So again, if you haven't written it down, self-pity, resentment, they're the two most common things and they're the luxury that no alcoholic can afford. So it's not the case that you're going to go out, I hope everybody in here has been living examples that even after a period of sobriety, you go back out and it's a year of healing, you go back out as a light drinker. I think there's been enough examples, and hopefully you've been paying attention to what's happened to people in this room, that when they go back hard. And if you've been blessed enough to catch it and nip it in the bud right away, good on you, and use that as an amazing learning experience, but learn from it. Identify why it happened. What was the underlying thing that made it happen? So the other things that I just want to go over, there are lapses that I'm going to explain this in a session that lead to relapse. Lapses in honesty are one of the big ones for people relapsing. When I start lying to myself and to other people, it's a very good chance that I'm going to drink on it unless I clean it up. And I see lots of nodding going on. We're as sick as our secrets. So this is a program of rigorous honesty. And the person that you have to be honest with is yourself. And for me, that was a huge, huge lesson to learn. Because I just believed that I could carry on doing this with impunity. And I couldn't actually I never looked at myself in the mirror. I never videoed myself drunk like I ask people to do now, or take photos of themselves at their worst, because I was lying to myself. And then when I've gone through the experience with you guys and seen how hugely emotional it is, because I think that's when the connection occurs, is when we look in the video and we look in the wreckage of the picture of what we've done to ourselves, and you go, oh my God, that is me. And one of the beautiful things in AA about relapsers is that they give us our disease looking us back in our own face. When you have somebody that calls you up drunk, or you see them drunk, that is your disease looking back at you. You don't look any different than that, sound any different than that, and you may be shocked and appalled at what you see. Now make this connection for your own sake. That's you. And I sure did not want to own that one. I once had a recording played back to me that I left on a phone machine, and I laughed at it. But I also inside was so filled with horror and humiliation, because I was actually seeing myself. And I'm a blackout drinker. And one of the convenient things about blacking out is everybody else has the memories and you don't. So recording your relapse, recording what happened to you, how you felt, is essential to owning the disease, because it's all too easy to laugh it off or just think, oh, I don't know what happened. I'm sure it was horrible, but, and I would never allow myself to address it again. If I hadn't blacked out, I blocked it out. But we learn afterwards that others don't. Our families, our relationships, all the people around us are affected. And then they leave us and we wonder why. Or we keep promising them that we're never going to do it again. And many of them, because we've been in their lives for so long, still stick with us. But they see us as we really are. And so I'm inviting you to take a moment to be really honest about what you look like when you're active in your addiction. And when you've seen other people, and I never used to see these because I was always drunk when everybody else was drunk. I didn't really meet alcoholics until I came into AA. And people started phoning me up drunk, or turning up at meetings drunk, or I'd be talking to them afterwards and I'm like, oh, that's really awful. And I'd be judgmental and like, oh, isn't that pathetic that that person's, smells like that or has soiled himself or whatever. And that was me. That was me. So this disassociation is, I think, critical to the central of relapse. It's not really me. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay, I think we're on to something here, because although I haven't read it written this way at all, I do think there is this massive disconnect in relapsers. Why do other people get this program and the desire is taken away and they never drink again? I don't understand them. What I do understand is every single person I know who works these steps is alive and in the program. And we know that there's only 5% of us making it. But of that 5%, 100% success rate of those who are thoroughly working their program. So we're all really bright people. I know you guys are. I know each of you. The intellect in here is incredibly high. You're all accomplished people. But why can't we see ourselves in this people that we now turn our nose up at or are shocked at when we see them drunk? That is our disease looking us back in the face. Now, all we have to do is put our face on that person. And that is a guarantee. That is a guarantee if we continue to drink. Because we know from not just what we read in the book that it's a progressive disease, we know for ourselves. At some point, most of us drank like normal people. And then one day I describe it as my switch went. Until I never had any more control over taking that drink than I did over finally going to sleep when I was tired. It just happened. And when sometimes I could get away with having one or two, and I would try and convince myself, geez, I've got this now. And then it got progressive. And then I'd go out and I'd really go out. So if you've gone out and you've been only out briefly, consider it a blessing, but you need to learn why. And also this healthy respect for the fact the disease is progressive. But the most important thing, and I'm imploring you to do this, is own it. Internalize it. See your face on the person that is struggling. See your face on the person that is sitting on the side of the street begging with a sign. See yourself as the newcomer coming into the room, disheveled and not making a lot of sense. See yourself as the person that's waiting in the emergency room. Put your face on that person and know that they're no different than you or I. They have this thing just like we do. And I have to say, it wasn't until I jokingly went into an in-person meeting in early days, and I was laughing about, oh, haha, you know, how many times I'd relapsed and all the rest of it. And this man of, he's a good friend, and I really respect him, Bruce. My day one was his day two. And he had 22 years sobriety up until that day. And everybody thought that he lives in Whistler, that he'd gone fishing. And in fact, it was after COVID, and he'd gone to a celebration of life, and they were handing around shots to celebrate the person. And he just picked one up and he went fishing all right for 2 weeks with a bunch of whiskey. And he came back into the meeting, the same first time I'd been in this in-person meeting. And I'll never forget his share. You know, it took him out just like that. He'd stopped going to meetings, but most of all, he said he thought he was cured. He thought because he'd done enough of this, he'd done the steps, that he had enough self-knowledge about the disease that there's no way it would take him out, until it did. And this, I started off by talking about the importance of establishing a physical home base where you feel comfortable. You may have to try a few, but one of the reasons I say this is the only reason Bruce is alive is because the people in his home group came and found him. And all he had was whiskey bottles around him. He hadn't eaten for days. And after 22 years, he was on his way out. So I know this has been a very heavy meeting, and it's not AA, but Relapse Alert is what this is all about. And there's red flags that you're now aware of. And I just want you to be really mindful what they are, and put pen to paper. And do please reflect on this after this meeting. It's recorded. Listen to it again, because the whole point here is not for me, but I want you to connect with yourself. I want you to connect with the alcoholic that is you. That doesn't have to be the way you live your life the rest of your days. But for me, I didn't start to recover until I really owned, I've got this thing. This is my thing. But the beautiful thing is that there's treatment for it. It's just I have to do it every day, and I have to put as much into it as is necessary to counteract, you know, all the energy that I would put into my drinking career. And I put a lot of energy into my drinking and my partying and my plotting. And just think about that for 1 second. At your worst, how much time, energy, and flow did you put into this disease? It ruled my life. I was constantly thinking about how much I had left. I was constantly thinking about where I had it hid. I was constantly thinking about where I'd forgotten it and coming across it, and did I have money to get it? It was a big job. If I take that energy and just try something different, let's take all that energy and put it into getting healthy, into owning the disease, into owning alcoholic Jill, looking in the mirror and saying, there but for the grace of God go I. You know, looking in the street and owning that person and saying, that's me too. That's me too. That's where I could go. And get rid of this illusion and delusion that I have that that could never be me. Because one thing I can guarantee, if you hang around these rooms long enough, you're going to see this scenario acted out over and over and over again for the relapsers that don't get it, that don't become mindful and own that they've got this thing, and then put one day at a time all that energy into the recovery. And then you get your best life, and you will be supported and able to cope with absolutely anything that life throws at you. Because the spiritual element comes into this program, you will discover you never were fighting this alone. You were just disconnected from your higher power. But even without accepting that, you can accept that you can never, ever, ever pick up again. And that's what I pray for each and every one of you. So I don't know if that has helped at all, but I'm going to stop the recording there and we'll open it up for a chat. Okay?